The creature reached out its hand and touched my arm. It was dying. I had just put 6 silver rounds into its chest, blood pooling on the ice beneath it, lungs filling with fluid, minutes from death at most, and instead of clawing my throat out with its last breath, it reached for me, gently, like it was trying to tell me something. That moment has haunted me for 46 years. I have replayed it 10,000 times, lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, wondering what it wanted me to understand. But I need to back up, because you're probably wondering what kind of creature I'm talking about. What could possibly require silver bullets to kill? And why the United States government would send Navy SEALs into a Michigan forest to hunt something that officially does not exist. The answers to those questions changed everything I thought I knew about the world. I'm 74 years old. I'm dying of cancer. 6 months left, maybe less. And I'm about to tell you about a classified mission that the government has threatened to destroy my life over if I ever spoke about it. I signed documents, non-disclosure agreements that went beyond top secret, papers that threatened imprisonment, destruction of my pension, consequences that would extend to my family. For 46 years, I have honored those agreements. Not anymore. 3 of the men who served alongside me on that mission are already dead. Heart attacks, cancer, 1 bullet to the head that the coroner called self-inflicted. I visited his grave last month, stood there in the rain, wondered if he chose that way out because he couldn't live with what we did. I'm the last one alive. And I've decided that what we encountered in those woods, what we were ordered to do, what I ultimately chose to participate in, deserves to be known by the American people who funded the black budget that sent us there. My name doesn't matter. It would only put my remaining family at risk. My rank was Chief Petty Officer. I served with SEAL Team 2 for 11 years before that mission ended my career in ways I could never have anticipated. And I'm telling you now that the creature we were sent to capture in the forests of northern Michigan in the winter of 1978 was not a bear, was not a wolf, was not any animal recognized by science. It walked on 2 legs like a man. It stood over 8 feet tall. It had shoulders broader than any human being I've ever seen. And it had intelligence in its eyes that I have never been able to forget. They called the operation Cleanup and Containment. What they should have called it was First Contact. Now, you might be wondering why the government would send Navy SEALs to hunt something in a Michigan forest. What possible connection could exist between elite military operators and something that sounds like a campfire story? We wondered the same thing, but what they showed us in that briefing room changed everything. And to understand why I was chosen for this mission, you need to understand what kind of man I was in 1978. I grew up in a dying steel town in eastern Ohio. My father was killed in a furnace accident when I was 16. I enlisted in the Navy 2 days after my 18th birthday because I needed to escape. I needed something bigger than those narrow horizons. I never imagined that something bigger would include creatures that science says cannot exist. By winter of 1978, I had been a SEAL for 9 years. 3 combat deployments to Vietnam. I had seen men die in ways that would give civilians nightmares for life. I had killed enemy combatants close enough to watch the light leave their eyes. I thought I had seen everything that could exist in this world. I was wrong. The briefing took place at a facility I still cannot name. Even now, dying, knowing the government can do nothing more to me, I will not reveal its location. Some oaths are harder to break than others. 7 of us, selected from different SEAL teams, pulled from our assignments with no explanation given to our commanding officers. Just orders to report to coordinates. Pack for cold weather. Tell no one. When I walked into that room and saw the other 6 men, I recognized 3 from previous operations. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were serious operators. Men with combat experience and cold competence that only comes from years of doing the hardest jobs the military offers. Men who had seen things that would break most people. Men who had done things that would haunt anyone with a conscience. Whatever this mission was, they had assembled the absolute best. That should have been my first warning. The man who briefed us wore no uniform, offered no name, no handshake, no pleasantries, grey hair cut short, eyes that looked through you rather than at you. The kind of eyes you see in men who have spent decades in the shadow world of intelligence and black operations. Behind him was a map of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, with a red circle drawn around a section of national forest, 40 miles from the nearest town. He told us that for 18 months there had been incidents in that area. Unusual incidents that had attracted the attention of agencies whose names he would not speak aloud. Hikers had disappeared, 6 of them over 18 months. No bodies recovered. Search parties found nothing but abandoned equipment and signs of violence. Hunting parties reported encounters with something they couldn't identify. Experienced woodsmen, men who had spent their entire lives in forests, coming out white-faced and shaking, refusing to go back. Local law enforcement investigated, found evidence that matched no known predator in the region, evidence they couldn't explain, evidence that made them request federal assistance. Then he showed us the photographs. I can still see them when I close my eyes. The first was a plaster cast of a footprint, canine in shape, but 19 inches long. The stride pattern suggested something walking upright on 2 legs. The depth of the impression indicated a weight of at least 400 pounds. The second showed claw marks on a pine tree, deep gouges in the bark, 4 parallel lines, 9 feet off the ground. Think about that for a moment. 9 feet. Whatever made those marks was either impossibly tall or could jump to heights that defied physics. The third was a deer carcass torn apart with surgical precision. Organs removed and consumed. Specific organs: heart, liver, kidneys. The rest of the meat untouched, like something knew exactly what it wanted and took only that. He told us this feeding pattern matched no known predator in North America. Wolves don't do that. Bears don't do that. Mountain lions don't do that. Nothing does that. But here's where it gets stranger. Far stranger than I was prepared for. The briefer paused, looked at each of us, then said that what he was about to reveal was classified above top secret. The government had known about creatures matching this description for over 30 years. Multiple agencies, documented encounters dating back to the late 1940s. And a decision had been made at the highest levels to capture a live specimen. Previous attempts had failed. Civilian contractors, all of them. That's why they called us. Then he showed us the sketch. The room went silent. It showed a creature standing upright like a man, but with the head of a wolf. The proportions were wrong in ways that made my stomach turn. Torso too long, arms too muscular, legs bent backward at the knee like a dog's hind legs. The face showed a long snout filled with teeth, and eyes the artist had drawn with intelligence that seemed almost human. I studied that sketch and felt something shift in my understanding of the world. I had seen terrible things in Vietnam, seen what humans could do to each other. But this was different. This was evidence that the world contained things our science couldn't explain, and our weapons might not be able to stop. They called them Type 3 cryptid biological entities. The men who had encountered them in the field called them something else. Dogmen. Now, I know what you're thinking. I sat in that briefing room thinking the same thing. This had to be a test, a psychological evaluation to see how we'd respond to impossible information. We were SEALs. We dealt in reality, concrete threats that could be eliminated with planning and firepower. We didn't chase monsters through forests. But then the briefer showed us the film, and everything changed. Everything I thought I knew about the world, about what was possible, about the comfortable boundaries between science and myth. All of it shattered in less than 60 seconds of grainy footage, grainy 16mm footage, shot from a distance with a telephoto lens. The timestamp in the corner showed September 1977, 15 months before our briefing. A forest clearing at dusk, light fading but still enough to see details. For 30 seconds, nothing but trees and underbrush moving in the wind. The camera occasionally trembled. You could tell whoever was filming was nervous. Their hands weren't steady. I remember thinking this would be another blurry blob, another inconclusive piece of evidence that skeptics could explain away. A bear standing upright, a man in a costume, a trick of shadows and failing light. I had seen supposedly convincing footage before, Bigfoot films, UFO videos, all of them disappointments upon close examination. This was different. Then something emerged from the tree line. Every skeptical thought evaporated like morning fog. It walked on two legs with a gait that was fundamentally wrong, that hitched and lurched in ways no human body could move, the way its weight shifted, the way its shoulders rolled with each step, the way its head tracked independently of its body like a predator scanning for prey, while its body continued forward without pause. None of it matched any movement pattern I had ever seen from a human being, and I had spent years studying how people move, how they walk, how they run, how they carry themselves when they think no one is watching. This was not human, covered in dark fur that looked almost black in the fading light, massive. Even from the distance the camera was filming, you could tell this thing was enormous. The trees around it provided scale. It was taller than branches that had to be 8 feet off the ground. When it turned toward the camera, I saw the face, and I understood immediately. This was not a costume, not a hoax, not any trick of light and shadow. The snout, the ears, the way the jaw hinged, the proportions of the skull relative to the body. No costume could achieve that. No special effects of 1977 could create movement that natural, that fluid. It stood there for 10 seconds, head turning slowly, scanning the tree line, scanning the clearing, like it was checking for threats before crossing open ground. I could see muscles moving beneath its fur, individual muscle groups flexing and relaxing. I could see the steam of its breath in the cold September air. I could see the way its weight shifted as it turned, distributing mass exactly the way a living creature does. Then it dropped to all fours and vanished into the forest with impossible speed. The transition from 2 legs to 4 was seamless, instantaneous, natural, like it was designed to move both ways with equal efficiency, like neither mode was its natural state, like it could choose either at will. No one spoke when the film ended. The room was silent for at least 30 seconds. I looked at the other operators, hard men, men who had seen terrible things in Vietnam, men who didn't flinch at photographs of carnage or descriptions of violence. Every single one of them had gone pale. The briefer let the silence hang, let it sink in, let us process what we had just witnessed. Then he told us about the men who shot that footage. The briefer let the silence hang, then told us the footage had been shot by a 2-man surveillance team tracking the creature for 3 weeks. They were found 2 days later. One dead, throat torn out. The other survived, but suffered a complete psychological break. Currently in a facility where he would spend the rest of his life. The creature had known it was being watched. It had allowed itself to be filmed, then demonstrated what it could do to men who invaded its territory. Our mission was to capture one alive. We were given tranquilizer rifles, steel cable nets, a transport cage reinforced to withstand what they called significant force, lethal force authorized only as a last resort, only if team members faced imminent death, only with explicit authorization from the team leader. The creature was to be taken alive if at all possible. The scientific value of a living specimen, they said, was incalculable. The briefer looked at us when he said this, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something that looked like hunger. We deployed 3 days later. Helicopter insertion, landing zone 5 miles from the target area. The weather was brutal, temperatures well below zero, wind chill that made exposed skin dangerous within minutes. We established base camp in a cabin prepared by advance personnel, then began reconnaissance. Those first days, I thought we were wasting time, chasing something that might not exist, that the film could have been fabricated. I remember how quickly that certainty evaporated. Third night in the forest, observation posts at 4 points around the perimeter. I was partnered with a man I'll call Rodriguez. SEAL Team 4, 2 tours in Vietnam, reputation for being unshakable. Rodriguez was the kind of man you wanted beside you when things went bad. And in our line of work, things always went bad eventually. I had worked with him once before on a training exercise, watched him stay calm when a live fire drill went sideways, and rounds started landing closer than they should. Never flinched, never raised his voice, just methodically worked the problem until it was solved. I trusted him completely. We were positioned on a ridge overlooking a frozen creek bed. The creek had frozen solid weeks ago, the ice thick enough to support the weight of anything that might cross it. Animal trails in the snow showed. This was a major route through the forest. Deer, elk, smaller predators. Everything used this corridor. If the creature moved through this area, it would likely use this path. Old growth pines and hemlocks surrounded us, some 200 years old, trees that had been standing when the nation was young, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even starlight struggled to penetrate. The darkness beneath those branches was absolute, complete, the kind of darkness that makes your eyes play tricks on you. Temperature dropped to 15 below zero. Even with our cold weather gear, layers of insulation designed by the military for exactly this kind of operation, I could feel the chill seeping into my bones, feel my fingers going numb despite the chemical warmers in my gloves, feel the cold air burning my lungs with every breath. We had been in position 4 hours when Rodriguez touched my arm. His hand was steady, but his grip was tighter than necessary. He pointed toward the creek, I raised my binoculars, scanned the area slowly, methodically, the way I had been trained. At first, nothing. Snow, ice, dark shapes of trees, shadows that could have been anything. Then I noticed something else, something that raised the hair on the back of my neck. The forest had gone completely silent. I don't mean quiet. I mean silent. Absolutely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, no crack of branches, no rustle of small creatures moving through underbrush, no call of nightbirds, no distant howl of wolves, nothing. The silence was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, could hear the blood rushing through my veins, could hear Rodriguez's breathing beside me, slow and controlled. In 9 years of operating in jungles and forests and swamps, I had never experienced silence like that. The natural world is never silent. There's always something, always, unless something has scared every living creature into absolute stillness. I swept the binoculars slowly across the creek bed. That's when I saw the eyes, 200 meters away, just visible through a gap in the trees, 2 points of reflected light in the darkness, catching the faint starlight and throwing it back. But they weren't at the height you'd expect for a deer, or a wolf, or a fox, or any animal moving through the forest at night. They were at least 7 feet off the ground, maybe higher. As I watched, the eyes moved, shifting left in a smooth motion that tracked along our position, moving with us, following our exact location on that ridge. It knew where we were. It had been watching us. The entire time we thought we were observing the forest, something had been observing us. Rodriguez reached for his radio. I stopped him. Something told me that making any noise would be a mistake. Every instinct from 9 years of combat operations screamed at me to stay silent, to not attract the attention of whatever was watching from the darkness. We remained motionless. Felt like hours, probably 15 minutes. Then the eyes simply vanished, gone, without a sound. None of us slept that night. The team leader, a lieutenant commander I'll call Harris, gathered us before dawn. The original plan called for locating the creature's den, establishing a capture zone with nets and tranquilizers. But now, it knew we were here. Harris wanted to accelerate, push into the forest in force, drive the creature toward a prepared capture point. I argued against it, told him we didn't know enough. The briefing made clear these creatures were intelligent. Rushing into confrontation would get someone killed. Harris listened, then overruled me. He reminded me our orders came from levels far above his pay grade. The people who sent us expected results. The hunt began at first light. What happened next is something I need you to understand clearly, because it reveals something crucial about what we were dealing with. We moved into the forest in a modified line formation, each man responsible for a sector, while maintaining visual contact with operators on either side. Terrain was difficult, steep ridges, snow, deadfall, that made silent movement impossible. Every step announced our presence. I remember thinking we weren't hunting this creature. We were offering ourselves as bait. The first attack came without warning. No sound preceded it. No movement in the trees. No displaced snow. Nothing. One moment, we were moving through a stand of pines, maintaining our formation, eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. The next moment, the man on my left, a SEAL named Patterson, was simply gone. Not dead, not down, gone. I heard a wet tearing noise, the sound of fabric and flesh separating, then a scream that cut off so abruptly it was like someone had hit a mute button. One moment screaming, the next moment silence. I spun toward the sound, rifle raised, finger on the trigger. Nothing. Nothing but trees, shadows, a spray of red across the snow that hadn't been there 2 seconds before. Arterial blood, bright red against white, steam rising from it in the cold air. Patterson had been dragged into the forest so fast, none of us saw what took him. Not a glimpse, not a blur of movement, just there 1 second, gone the next. Harris called a halt. We formed a defensive perimeter, weapons outward, scanning the tree line, covering every angle. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat, could hear the blood rushing in my ears, could feel the adrenaline surging through my system, making my hands shake despite years of training. I had been in ambushes before. Vietnam. Operations I still can't talk about. Experienced the chaos of sudden contact with an enemy force. The confusion, the violence, the split-second decisions that meant life or death. But this was different. This was something that had moved through our formation, a formation of highly trained special operations personnel with overlapping fields of fire, and taken a man without any of us seeing it happen. Not a glimpse, not a shadow, nothing. This was a predator operating on a level I had never encountered, a level I didn't know existed. Then came the second attack. Rodriguez looked up a fraction of a second before the creature dropped from the branches directly onto him. That fraction of a second probably saved his life, gave him just enough warning to get his arms up, to absorb some of the impact. But it wasn't enough. I saw it clearly for the first time. And what I saw will stay with me until the moment I die. Massive, easily 8 feet tall, maybe more, shoulders broader than any man I've ever seen, broader than professional bodybuilders, broader than seemed possible for any living creature. Body covered in dark, grayish-brown fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dense, thick, matted in places with something dark that I realized later was dried blood. Face exactly like the sketch, but seeing it in person was different. A sketch is just lines on paper. This was real, breathing, moving, alive, long canine snout, teeth that flashed white as it opened its jaws, teeth designed for tearing, for rending, for killing. But the eyes are what I remember most. They were not the eyes of an animal. Yellow, almost gold in the filtered sunlight, intelligent, aware, looking at us and understanding what we were, what we represented, what we had come to do, and filled with fury that seemed almost human in its intensity. Fury. And something else. Something that might have been contempt. Rodriguez got his rifle up before impact, but the creature drove him into the snow with force I felt through the ground. I fired 3 rounds at center mass from 15 meters. I saw the bullets strike, saw the creature flinch. Then it turned its head toward me with an expression I can only describe as annoyance. My rounds had hurt it, but they hadn't stopped it, hadn't even slowed it down significantly. What happened next took 3 seconds, but I remember it in slow motion. The creature reached down, picked Rodriguez up with one hand around his throat. Rodriguez was not a small man, 200 pounds in full gear. The creature lifted him like he weighed nothing. Then it looked directly at me, yellow eyes locked onto mine, and I understood with absolute certainty that it was making a choice. It could kill me, kill all of us, but it was choosing not to, at least not yet. It wanted me to see what it could do, wanted me to understand what we were dealing with. Then it threw Rodriguez, not dropped, threw, like a man throwing a baseball. Rodriguez flew 30 feet before hitting a tree trunk with a sound I still hear when the night is quiet. He didn't get up, didn't move. The impact broke his spine in 3 places. He survived, but never walked again. The creature dropped to all 4s, vanished into the forest before any of us could react. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 seconds. 2 of our 7-man team were down, 1 dead, 1 critically wounded. We had fired maybe 20 rounds and achieved nothing except making it angry. Harris called for extraction. We carried Rodriguez to the landing zone in silence. No one spoke during the flight back. There was nothing to say. Now, here's where the story takes a darker turn, because I assumed the mission was over. The loss of 2 men, complete failure of the capture attempt. Surely they would stand down, reassess, maybe abandon the operation entirely. I was wrong. When we landed, Harris was met by the man who gave our original briefing. They spoke privately for several minutes. When Harris returned, his face was pale, his voice flat in a way that told me he had just received orders he did not like. The mission parameters had changed. A decision had been made at the highest levels to eliminate the creature rather than capture it. A specialized weapons package was being delivered. We would return to the forest within 48 hours. I asked what kind of weapons could stop something that had shrugged off rifle fire. Harris just shook his head. I would see when the package arrived. The weapons arrived the next morning. I had spent the night lying awake in that cabin, listening to the wind howling outside, thinking about what we were about to do, thinking about the eyes I had seen in the darkness, the intelligence behind them, the choice it had made not to kill us all when it clearly had the power to do so. I had questions I couldn't ask anyone, questions that would have marked me as weak, unreliable, potentially dangerous to the mission. What if this creature was simply defending its home? What if it had a family somewhere in those forests? What if we were the monsters in this story? 4 rifles arrived with the dawn, delivered by a helicopter that touched down just long enough to offload a weapons case and a technician in civilian clothes. Almost normal-looking rifles, except for oversized barrels that suggested a non-standard caliber, and strange ammunition magazines that attached to the underside of the receiver in a configuration I had never seen before. The technician explained the technical specifications with the casual confidence of someone who had given this briefing many times before. They fired a specialized round developed specifically for this type of target. Years of research, millions of dollars, all focused on creating ammunition that could reliably kill something our standard weapons could not. A core of silver alloy, not pure silver. An alloy that maintained ballistic properties while maximizing the element's effectiveness. Surrounded by a fragmenting copper jacket that would spread the silver throughout the wound channel upon impact. I asked why silver. The technician looked at me like I had asked why water was wet. Like this was common knowledge that everyone in certain circles understood. Silver had been found to be significantly more effective against these creatures than standard ammunition. Field testing confirmed it. Laboratory analysis suggested possible reasons. Something about cellular reaction to the element. Something about the way their biology differed from known mammals. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The message was clear. We weren't just dealing with an unknown predator. We were dealing with something that had specific weaknesses. Weaknesses that folklore had documented for centuries. Weaknesses that science was only beginning to understand. I stood in that cabin, holding one of those rifles, feeling its weight in my hands, and I understood that I had stepped into a world operating by rules I didn't know existed. Rules where silver bullets were a practical military solution, rules where monsters were real, rules where men like me were sent to kill them. We returned 2 days later, 5 of us now. Harris decided the smaller team would be more mobile, harder to detect, orders to kill on sight. We found signs almost immediately. Trees marked with claw gouges, tracks matching the photographs, a deer carcass torn apart in that same distinctive pattern. The creature was still in the area. It hadn't fled after our first encounter. I realized with a sick feeling that it was waiting for us. It knew we would come back. It wanted us to come back. Harris set up an ambush, a natural choke point where a frozen stream passed between 2 steep ridges. Anything moving through would be forced to expose itself. We took positions on the ridges. Temperature dropped as the sun set. Forest grew dark and silent. We waited. It came at midnight. I heard it before I saw it. Movement in the underbrush. Too large, too deliberate for any normal animal. Weight behind those footsteps. Mass displacing snow with each stride. I raised my rifle, activated the night vision scope. Green-tinted world, rocks, ice, dark shapes of trees. For a long moment, nothing out of place. Then it stepped out from behind a boulder, stood in the center of the frozen stream, looking directly up at our positions. It had known we were there the entire time. It had allowed us to set up our ambush. It had waited for darkness, waited for us to become cold and tired and complacent. Then it came to us on its own terms. This was its territory, its forest. We were intruders. And it had decided to face us rather than continue running. It stood there in moonlight, breath steaming in great plumes of white vapor, intelligence in its eyes as it looked from position to position, counting us, assessing the threat. It knew exactly where each of us was hidden, had probably known since before we arrived. Then it did something I never expected, something that haunts me more than almost anything else from that night. It spoke. Not words, not human language. A series of growls and barks and low rumbling tones that seemed to form patterns. It was communicating, warning us perhaps, or challenging us, or trying to convey something my human brain wasn't equipped to understand. The sounds were complex, varied, intentional. This wasn't an animal vocalizing instinctively. This was a being using language. Harris gave the order to fire. All 5 of us opened up simultaneously, silver rounds pouring into the creature from multiple angles. The effect was immediate. The creature screamed. I still hear that sound in my nightmares. Pain, rage, and something that might have been betrayal. It dropped to its knees in the frozen stream, rounds tearing into its body, dark blood spreading across ice. I could see it struggling to rise, to escape, to reach the tree line. But the silver rounds did what normal ammunition couldn't. They were killing it. I stopped firing, lowered my rifle, watched the creature dying in the creek bed below, and felt something I had never felt in all my years of combat. Something I had never felt in Vietnam, never felt in the dozens of operations where I had taken human life, never felt in all the years of violence that had defined my adult existence. I felt like a murderer, not a soldier doing his duty, not a warrior eliminating a threat, not even a hunter taking game, a murderer. Because this was not a mindless animal that attacked us out of instinct. This was not a rabid beast acting on base impulses. This was an intelligent being defending its territory from invaders who had come with weapons specifically designed to kill it. It had tried to communicate with us. I had heard those sounds, those complex vocalizations that were clearly language, clearly an attempt to convey meaning. It had tried to warn us away before resorting to violence, and we had come into its home, its ancestral forest, its territory that had probably been held by its kind for centuries, and we had killed it. Because some bureaucrat in Washington decided it would be valuable to study. Because some scientist in a laboratory wanted tissue samples. Because some committee in some basement office determined that this creature's life was worth less than the knowledge that could be extracted from its corpse. The creature collapsed onto its side, the snow beneath it turning dark with blood. So much blood spreading across the ice in a pool that seemed to grow forever. Its breathing was ragged and wet, the sound of lungs filling with fluid, the sound of death approaching. I had heard that sound before, in the jungles of Vietnam, in the aftermath of firefights, the sound a body makes when it knows the end is coming. But there was something else in its breathing, something that sounded almost like sobbing. I climbed down from my position, moved slowly toward the creek, rifle raised but no longer pointed at the target, no longer needed. The others called out for me to stay back, to maintain distance until they had confirmed the kill, standard procedure, proper protocol. I ignored them. I needed to see, I needed to understand what we had done. I needed to look into the eyes of this creature and witness the death we had inflicted. Up close, the creature was even more remarkable than from a distance. Its fur was thick and dense, multiple layers, clearly adapted for survival in extreme cold. The outer coat was coarse, designed to shed water and snow. The undercoat was softer, insulating. Evolution had spent millennia perfecting this body for life in frozen forests. Its hands were hybrid, a blend of human and canine anatomy that I had never seen in any textbook, any museum, any scientific illustration. Long fingers tipped with claws that could tear through flesh and bone with ease, but also fingers with joints that allowed fine manipulation, fingers that could grasp tools, make fire, create art, perhaps even write. Its face, even twisted in the agony of dying, showed the bone structure of something that had evolved to think, to reason, to feel. The cranial capacity was enormous, room for a brain that might rival or exceed our own. This was not an animal. This was a person of a different species, a person who looked nothing like us, but a person nonetheless. And I had helped kill it. Then it opened its eyes, looked at me, those yellow eyes that had seemed so terrifying in combat, that had blazed with fury as it defended itself against our assault, now looked different, tired, sad, ancient, like they had seen 1,000 human faces before mine, like they had witnessed centuries of violence from our kind, like they knew exactly what we were and had long ago given up hope that we could be anything else. It made a sound, soft, rumbling, almost like a question. Why? That's what I heard in that sound, even though I couldn't understand its language. Why did you do this? Then it reached out one massive hand and touched my arm. The touch was gentle. The touch was deliberate. Not an attack, not a final desperate strike. Just a touch. Connection. Contact. It was trying to tell me something in its final moments, trying to bridge the gap between our species with this simple gesture. And I did not have the ability to understand. The creature died with its hand on my arm. I felt the life leave its body, felt the muscles relax, felt the warmth begin to fade. I felt the moment when those intelligent eyes went empty and dark, when the being behind them departed for whatever comes next. I stood there in that frozen stream, blood on my boots, blood on my hands, blood spreading across the ice around me, and I understood that I had participated in something evil. Not in the heat of battle, not in self-defense. I had participated in the calculated murder of something that had every right to exist, something that had lived in these forests long before humans set foot on this continent. But here's the part that haunts me most, the part I need you to understand. It wasn't just the killing. I have killed before, understood that sometimes killing is necessary. What haunts me is the order Harris gave just before we opened fire. Shoot for the body, not the head. The scientists wanted the brain intact for study. Make sure the creature suffers a slow death. A specimen that dies from gradual blood loss provides better tissue samples than one that dies instantly. We weren't just ordered to kill this intelligent being. We were ordered to make it suffer. I followed that order, aimed for the body, watched it fall, struggle, try to escape while blood pooled on ice. I could have ended it quickly. One shot to the head, given it the mercy of a fast death. Instead, I followed orders. Let it suffer. Because that's what I was trained to do. That's what haunts me. Not that I killed it, but that I let it die slowly, in pain. Because someone in a laboratory wanted better samples. Harris called for extraction. We prepared the body for transport. Orders were to bring it to the staging area, then to a facility for study. I helped load it onto the helicopter, watched men in hazmat suits take measurements, tissue samples, photographs of every inch with clinical detachment. I wanted to scream that this had been a living, thinking, feeling being. Wanted to tell them what I saw in its eyes as it died. I stayed silent. Nothing I said would matter. The decision to kill this creature was made long before we deployed. We were just weapons they pointed at it. Debriefing lasted 3 days, questioned separately and together about every detail, required to sign documents that would never officially exist. Cover stories for injuries and deaths. Patterson died in a training accident. Rodriguez injured in a helicopter crash. The operation never happened. The creature never existed. Go back to your units. Continue your careers. Forget everything. I could not forget. I tried. God knows I tried. Threw myself into work, long hours on training ranges and in classrooms, exhausting myself until I collapsed into dreamless sleep. It didn't work. I transferred to a training command, spent 2 years teaching new SEALs the skills that had allowed me to kill something that deserved to live. Every time I looked at a new class, I wondered if any of them would someday receive orders like mine, wondered if they'd have the courage to refuse that I had lacked. I left the Navy in 1980, honorable discharge, medal for valor that I keep in a box because I can't bear to look at it. The medal was for Vietnam, heroism that seemed meaningless compared to the cowardice I showed in that Michigan forest. I moved to a small town in Montana, became a hunting guide, spending days in wilderness with men who paid me to help them kill deer and elk and bear. The irony wasn't lost on me. Professional killer of animals after killing something that was so much more. But wilderness was the only place I felt peace. Cities too loud, too crowded, too full of people with no idea what lurked in dark places of the world. In Montana's mountains, I could breathe, think, try to make sense of what I had done. The nightmares started immediately. They have never stopped. I dream of those yellow eyes looking at me with something that might have been forgiveness. Dream of the sound it made dying, that wet, rattling breath. Dream of its hand touching my arm. That gentle contact, its final attempt to communicate with the being that killed it. Sometimes in dreams, I understand what it was trying to tell me. Sometimes I wake with the knowledge just out of reach, fading like mist in morning sun. 46 years I've researched these creatures. Every account, every sighting report, every piece of folklore. I've traveled to libraries and archives across the country, old newspapers, forgotten journals, any mention of encounters matching what I killed. I've interviewed dozens of witnesses, people desperate to tell someone who would believe them. I've built a library filling an entire room, boxes and filing cabinets I've never shown anyone. Here's what I've learned. The Dogman is not a single creature. It's a species, a population living alongside humanity for thousands of years. Native Americans knew about them, called them different names in different tribes, but descriptions remarkably consistent. The Ojibwe called them Windigukaanak. The Seneca called them something translating roughly to the Watchers in the Woods. Tall beings covered in fur, walking on two legs like men, heads of wolves or dogs, intelligent, able to communicate, living in family groups, defending territories. Beings most humans never saw because they didn't want to be seen. The tribes had protocols, knew which areas to avoid, what signs indicated territory not meant for humans. They lived in uneasy coexistence, both sides understanding boundaries. Then European settlers arrived, brought guns, ambition, absolute certainty they had dominion over every living thing. Boundaries violated, unwritten treaties broken. The killing began. The creature I killed wasn't the only one the government has hunted. Other operations, other teams, other forests, capturing or killing specimens for study. Most ended badly for the humans. The creature we encountered was unusual. It hadn't killed more of us before we killed it. I've wondered if it showed restraint, deliberately chose not to eliminate our entire team, even though it clearly could have. I've wondered if it was trying to teach us something about the limits of violence, the possibility of coexistence. Before we demonstrated we were incapable of learning, these creatures are still out there. Reports continue from forests across the upper Midwest, Pacific Northwest, Appalachian Mountains, Louisiana swamps. People see things that cannot exist, report encounters matching what I killed 46 years ago. The government continues denying these creatures exist, while quietly funding operations to track and study them. The pattern hasn't changed. The killing hasn't stopped. I'm telling this now because I'm dying. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. Cancer that started in my lungs, spread to liver and bones. Nothing more they can do. I'm not afraid of death. Been expecting it since that night in Michigan, when I looked into dying eyes and understood I had done something unforgivable. I need someone to know the truth. These beings exist. They're intelligent. They deserve to live without being hunted by men with silver bullets and classified orders. The creature I killed had a family. I know this because we found evidence during reconnaissance. Evidence I didn't want to think about then. Evidence that has haunted me for 46 years. Tracks of different sizes in the snow. Not just the massive prints we were hunting, smaller ones too. Different stride lengths, different weights, adults and juveniles. Living together, moving together. A family unit. Den sites showing long-term habitation. Multiple seasons of use. Places where they sheltered from storms. Where they raised their young. where they lived their lives in the shadows of the ancient forests. The creature we killed was not a lone monster lurking in the woods. It was a member of a community, perhaps a parent protecting its young, perhaps a sibling, perhaps a mate who had spent years alongside another being like itself. When it died, something in that community was lost forever. A relationship ended, a memory erased, a presence that had been part of their lives every day simply ceased to exist. Because of us. Because of me. I think about that sometimes, more often than I'd like to admit. I think about the others who must have found the blood in the snow after we left. The helicopters had gone, the humans had departed, and somewhere in those forests, creatures like the one I killed had come looking for their family member, found the blood, the signs of violence, the absence where a presence had been. What did they understand about what had happened? Did they know humans had done this? Did they recognize our scent, our tracks, the particular type of violence we inflict? Did they grieve? I have spent 46 years researching these creatures, reading accounts, studying legends, interviewing witnesses, and everything I've learned suggests they do grieve, that they form bonds, that they remember their dead, which means somewhere in those forests there may still be creatures who carry the memory of what humans did to their kind in the winter of 1978. Who remember a family member who went out one night and never came home, who still watch, still wait, still wonder if we will ever learn. I am sorry. I say those words knowing they are inadequate, knowing they change nothing, knowing they cannot undo what was done. The creature I killed is still dead, has been dead for 46 years. Its family still lost it, still grieved it, still carries that absence in whatever form their memories take. The government still has its tissue samples, its bone fragments, its brain preserved in some laboratory for study. Whatever scientific knowledge they extracted from the corpse we delivered. My apology undoes none of that. But I am sorry. Sorry I was part of something that should never have happened. Sorry I followed orders I knew in my gut were wrong. Sorry I let fear and training and the weight of military discipline override the basic human instinct that told me what we were doing was evil. Sorry I didn't have the courage to refuse. If you see something in the forest you cannot explain, if you encounter one of these beings in the wild places where they still survive, if you find yourself face to face with something that looks back at you with intelligence and awareness, I ask you to do something I wasn't brave enough to do. Leave it alone, turn around, walk away. Let it live in peace without the interference of human curiosity or human fear or human weapons. These creatures have been here longer than us. The Native Americans knew them, lived alongside them, respected them. They have as much right to exist as we do, maybe more. They were here first. They are not monsters, not the mindless beasts of horror movies and campfire tales. They are not threats. Not unless we make them threats by invading their homes with weapons and hostile intent. They are simply different. And different does not mean dangerous. I will die soon with this secret finally spoken. Die knowing I broke oaths I swore to keep. Betrayed the trust of men now dead who cannot defend themselves or explain their own choices. I have done this because truth matters more than my word, more than my reputation, more than whatever consequences might come in the few months I have left. The government cannot hurt me now. What are they going to do? Give a dying man cancer? What you do with this information is up to you. Believe me or dismiss me as a dying man losing his grip on reality. a mind deteriorating along with a body, an old soldier telling stories that no one can verify. Share this story or let it fade into the noise of countless other accounts that people dismiss without consideration. But please, please, if you remember nothing else from my confession, remember this: the monsters are not always the ones who look different from us. Sometimes the monsters are ones who follow orders without question. Sometimes the monsters are ones who choose obedience over conscience. Sometimes the monsters are us. The only way to stop being a monster is to refuse, to say no, to look at the order you've been given and decide some things are more important than duty, more important than career, more important than approval of men who never have to live with consequences of what they ask you to do. I did not refuse. I followed my orders. I have spent 46 years paying the price. I hope you are braver than I was. I hope when your moment comes, you find the strength to choose differently. And that touch, that gentle touch as it lay dying, I think I finally understand what it was trying to tell me. Not forgiveness exactly, understanding. It knew what I was, knew what I had done, and in its final moments, it reached out to bridge the gap between our species with a simple touch. That was more humanity than I had shown to it. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I wonder if somewhere in those Michigan forests, one of its kind still remembers, still waits, still watches, and wonders if we will ever learn